Marriage. Mark's story of office betrayal. Reddit, true story. Welcome back. We often believe that betrayals come crashing in like thunderstorms, loud, messy, impossible to ignore. But sometimes, betrayal doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It comes quietly, in the late nights at the office, in glances that last just a little too long, in justifications whispered to ourselves until the truth becomes too heavy to carry. Tonight, our story takes us to the steel and glass towers of Chicago, a city that never sleeps, and where ambition often blurs the lines between right and wrong. Mark thought he had built a perfect life, a career he was proud of, a marriage built on love and years of trust. But temptation doesn't always come with warning signs. Sometimes it comes wrapped in charm, attention, and the intoxicating feeling of being seen when you feel invisible. If you've ever found yourself standing at the edge of a line you swore you'd never cross, if you've ever watched yourself become the villain in your own story, then Mark's story will feel like a mirror you don't want to look into, but maybe need to. Stay with me, because sometimes the heaviest betrayals are the ones we carry within ourselves. Mark, 34 years old, had always seen himself as a man of discipline. In the towering offices of downtown Chicago, he built a career step by step. Long nights, endless deadlines, sacrifices, quietly made. At home, Emma waited for him. She had been there before the promotions, before the corner office. She had believed in him when his paychecks barely covered their rent. And Mark loved her. He really did. But love, when neglected, becomes fragile. It wasn't that Emma changed. It was that somewhere along the way, Mark stopped noticing. Then came Elena, new to the company. Sharp, ambitious. She laughed at his jokes when no one else seemed to listen. She stayed late at the office without complaining. She made Mark feel important again. It started small. A coffee shared at a late meeting. A ride offered on a rainy day. A hand that brushed against his a moment too long. Mark told himself it was harmless. Just chemistry, just stress. Nothing he couldn't control. Until one night when the city lights of Chicago blurred into a sea of gold outside the office window, and Mark, tired and lonely and reckless, let the line disappear. A kiss, a mistake. But mistakes once made rarely stay small. The days that followed were filled with guilt that clung to Mark like a second skin. He went home, kissed Emma's forehead, said, "I love you," all while carrying a weight he couldn't put down. He thought he could bury it, pretend it hadn't happened, until a co-worker in the casual cruelty of office gossip snapped a photo during a company party, a photo where Mark and Elena stood too close, where the look in their eyes said everything their mouths refused to. The photo made its way through whispers and sideways glances, until it landed in Emma's hands. Mark never got the chance to explain. Emma looked at him once, really looked, and saw everything she needed to see. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't cry. She just said quietly, "You don't need to say anything I already know." That night, Emma packed a small bag. She left behind her wedding band glinting coldly on the kitchen counter, and with it, she left the life they had built together. The trust Mark had shattered, in a moment he could never undo. Elena. She quit the company a few weeks later. No goodbyes. No drama. Just silence. And Mark, he stayed in the same office, in the same city, surrounded by the same people, but forever a different man. Because some mistakes don't just cost you a relationship, they cost you the version of yourself you once believed you were. Mark's story reminds us of something we often forget. Betrayal doesn't always happen in grand, explosive moments. Sometimes it begins with a whisper, a glance held too long, a decision made in exhaustion and loneliness. No one wakes up and decides to ruin the life they built. No one plans to break the heart of the person who once felt like home. But betrayal isn't one big choice. It's 1,000 small ones. Every ignored instinct, every excuse whispered late at night. Every boundary crossed a little further until one day there's no line left to protect you. And here's the hardest truth. Sometimes the person you betray the most isn't the one you loved. It's yourself. Mark didn't just lose Emma. He lost the version of himself he was proud of. the man who could look in the mirror without flinching. Forgiveness is powerful, but self-forgiveness, that's a battle some people spend the rest of their lives fighting, one that leaves scars no one else can see. So if you're listening to this standing at a crossroads, whispering to yourself that it's harmless, that it doesn't matter, remember, the choices you make in the quiet moments, they build who you are, or they tear you apart. After Mark's story was shared, the comments section became a confession booth for thousands of people. People who had made mistakes. People who had been hurt. People who had stood at the edge and either crossed the line or walked away. Let's take a look at some of the most powerful reflections from the community. Words filled with pain, wisdom, and sometimes forgiveness. Comment on you better choices. It's scary how easy it is to lose yourself one tiny decision at a time. No one thinks they're the villain until they are 5K likes. Exactly. We don't fall in a single moment. It's the small choices, the silent compromises, that slowly change who we are. Comment: empty house. Emma's silence was louder than any scream. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't deserve a fight. Just a goodbye. 8K likes. Beautifully said. Not all battles are fought with words. Some of the most painful endings are the ones carried out in complete silence. Comment 3 lessons learned. The real tragedy isn't losing someone else. It's losing the person you thought you were. 3K likes. That cuts deep. Betraying someone you love changes them, but it also changes you sometimes forever. Comment 4. The boundaries matter. Flirting isn't harmless. Emotional cheating isn't harmless. Everything matters, especially the things we pretend don't. 9K likes. Yes. Every small action sets a precedent. The things we excuse today can become the regrets we carry tomorrow. Comment: healing after hurt. Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself. Mark might never get Emma's forgiveness, but if he wants peace, he has to forgive the broken version of himself first. 16. 1K likes. Absolutely. Forgiveness isn't always about hearing "I'm sorry." Sometimes it's about deciding to heal even without closure. Sad. Reading these comments reminds us every choice we make matters. Every boundary we cross, every silence we ignore, they shape who we become. If you're listening and carrying the weight of a mistake, remember this: you are not the worst thing you've ever done. But healing only begins when you stop pretending the cracks don't exist and start rebuilding one honest choice at a time. The text that ended everything. Claire's story of love and letting go. Reddit true story. Welcome back. We often believe that heartbreak comes crashing down. A screaming match. A dramatic goodbye at the door. But sometimes, heartbreak slips in quietly, through a missed call, through a message from an unknown number, through the silence that stretches too long until it's deafening. Tonight's story takes us to the misty streets of San Francisco, a city wrapped in fog, where even the brightest lights sometimes get swallowed by the gray. Claire thought she was building a future. She thought she had found someone who would be there through the storms, through the seasons, through everything. But love isn't always lost in fights and fury. Sometimes it's lost in a single text, a message that pulls the ground out from under you, leaving you standing there holding pieces of a dream you didn't even know was breaking. If you've ever trusted someone so completely that you stopped checking for cracks, if you've ever found out the truth, not from their lips, but from the cold glow of a phone screen, then Claire's story will echo in the quiet corners of your heart. Stay with me, because sometimes the goodbye you didn't see coming is the one that changes everything. Claire, 7 years old, had spent 3 years weaving dreams with Jason. They were the kind of couple you notice at coffee shops, laughing over inside jokes, eyes full of shared futures. They had plans. A little apartment with a balcony overlooking the city. A dog they hadn't adopted yet. but already had a name for. Claire believed with every piece of her heart that they were building something real, something lasting. Then came that Thursday night. Claire had made dinner. Jason was supposed to be home by 7. She lit candles, opened a bottle of wine, the one he loved, and waited. 7:38, 9. She called once, no answer. She texted, "Everything okay?" No reply. Around 10:15 p.m., Claire's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, only 5 words. "He's not coming home tonight." Her heart stopped. Her hands trembled. She called back immediately, straight to voicemail. She texted Jason again. Nothing. Claire sat at the kitchen table staring at the flickering candle, watching it burn lower and lower until only a stub of wax remained. The clock struck midnight before Jason walked through the door. He didn't offer excuses, didn't invent stories. He just stood there, looking at Claire, like a man already halfway out the door. And with a heavy, broken voice, he said, "I'm sorry, Claire, I fell in love with someone else." No anger rose in her chest. No desperate questions clawed at her throat. Just a cold, aching clarity. Claire nodded. She walked into the bedroom, packed a small bag, a few clothes, her journal, her favorite scarf. She left behind the framed photos, the love notes on the fridge, the half-finished puzzle they had started together. Claire stepped out into the San Francisco night, wrapped in mist, neon lights blurring like watercolor. And as she walked, she realized some goodbyes don't need words. Some endings don't need drama. Sometimes you just take a breath and you keep moving forward, even when your heart stays 2 steps behind. Claire's story reminds us that sometimes the real heartbreak isn't in the betrayal itself. It's in the realization that love isn't always enough to make someone stay. We grow up thinking love will fix everything, that if you love someone enough, they'll never look away. But love, real love, requires more than just feeling. It requires choice, commitment, effort, even when it's easier to chase something new. Jason didn't just fall in love with someone else. He chose to stop showing up for Claire, and Claire's strength wasn't in fighting for someone who had already left her behind. Her strength was in the quiet way she gathered her dignity, picked up the pieces of her heart, and walked away, without begging, without screaming, without looking back. Sometimes the loudest strength is the quietest one. It's in the way you refuse to let betrayal define you. It's in the way you choose yourself, even when your whole world is asking you to shatter. If you've ever been left with nothing but questions and a heavy heart, let Claire's story remind you. You are not what was done to you. You are not the promises someone else broke. You are every step you take forward, every breath you choose to keep breathing, every time you refuse to settle for love that isn't freely, wholly given. Sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives start the moment we decide to stop waiting at closed doors. Claire's story touched a nerve. In the quiet aftermath of heartbreak, the community gathered to share their stories, to offer their strength, to remind each other that even the deepest wounds can heal. Let's take a look at some of the most powerful comments, each one a quiet light for anyone who's ever had to walk away from love that didn't stay. Comment 1. You stay strong, soul. Sometimes the hardest part isn't losing them, it's realizing they were willing to lose you. 7K likes. That's so true. The real heartbreak isn't in the goodbye. It's in the moment you realize someone let you go without fighting. Son. Comment, you silent bravery. Claire's strength wasn't in holding on. It was in letting go without losing herself. 17. 2K likes. Exactly. Real strength is quiet. It's the decision to choose peace over pieces. Comment, you forgotten dreams. When they stop choosing you, it's your turn to choose yourself. Claire did exactly what so many of us are too scared to do. 9K likes. Beautifully put. Choosing yourself after betrayal isn't selfish. It's survival. Comment. For you healing through pain. You don't have to burn bridges. Sometimes you just cross them and never look back. 16 4K likes. Yes, not every ending needs anger. Sometimes the best closure is quiet distance. Comment of you steps forward. Claire didn't just survive that night. She started a new journey, one that didn't need anyone else's permission. 16 1K likes. Absolutely. Survival isn't the end. It's the beginning of rediscovering yourself. Reading these comments reminds us, heartbreak will try to convince you that you're broken. But the truth is, every goodbye, every tear, every step away from a love that didn't stay is also a step closer to the life you're meant to live. You are stronger than the people who couldn't see your worth. And no message, no silence can erase the love you owe yourself. The wedding invitation that broke his heart. Ethan's story of letting go. Reddit, true story. Welcome back. We often think that the past stays neatly tucked away, folded into old photo albums, buried beneath new routines, forgotten in the rush of life, moving forward. But sometimes the past finds its way back to you, in a letter, in a familiar handwriting, in a name you haven't spoken aloud in years, and suddenly you're right back where you started. Tonight's story takes place in the restless heart of New York City, a city that never stops moving, never looks back, except when it does. Ethan thought he had made peace with his past. He thought some love stories, while beautiful, are simply not meant to last. But when a letter arrived from the one person he never truly let go of, everything he thought he had buried came rushing back. If you've ever found yourself blindsided by a memory, if you've ever opened a door you thought was closed, only to realize you were still standing there, waiting, then Ethan's story will feel painfully familiar. Stay with me, because sometimes the hardest part of love isn't losing it. It's accepting that even the most beautiful chapters must have an ending. Ethan, 31 years old, thought he had learned how to leave the past behind. In a city like New York, where dreams rise and fall like the tide, you don't have time to look back. But some memories, they don't stay buried. They linger. They wait for a moment when your guard is down, and then they arrive quietly wrapped in an envelope, handwritten and familiar. The day Ethan received the letter started like any other, coffee in hand, rushing down the crowded sidewalk, dodging taxis and late trains. When he saw her handwriting, his heart stuttered. It had been 5 years. 5 years since their tearful goodbye at the airport. 5 years since they promised to find their way back someday. His mind raced ahead, building fantasies in the split second before he even opened the envelope. Maybe she missed him. Maybe she was coming home. Maybe the timing was finally right. But when he slid the card out, the air seemed to leave the room. It was an invitation, a wedding invitation. Hannah was getting married. Not to him, to someone else. Ethan sat on the edge of his worn-out couch, the city buzzing outside his window, holding the invitation like it might crumble if he gripped it too hard. Hannah had even added a personal note handwritten below the printed text. "You will always have a special place in my heart. Thank you for being part of my journey. I would love if you could come." Ethan laughed softly. A hollow sound filled more with sadness than humor. She meant it kindly. He knew that. But kindness can sometimes hurt more than cruelty. For hours Ethan sat there, remembering the way Hannah used to tuck her hair behind her ear, or when she was nervous. The way her eyes lit up whenever she talked about Paris. The way they used to dance barefoot in the kitchen, pretending the world outside didn't exist. And finally, Ethan made a decision. He placed the invitation back in its envelope, slid it into a drawer, not out of anger, not out of spite, but out of love, out of respect for what they once had, and acceptance that some love stories aren't meant to have a second chapter. That night, Ethan walked through the streets of New York, alone, but lighter somehow, not because he stopped loving her, but because he finally understood. Some goodbyes are final, and that's okay. Ethan's story reminds us of one of life's quietest heartbreaks, the realization that love, no matter how deep, no matter how real, sometimes simply isn't enough to keep two people together. We grow up on fairy tales believing that true love conquers all, that if you love hard enough, If you hold on long enough, the universe will conspire to bring you back together. But the truth is, love needs more than memory. Love needs timing. Love needs two people moving in the same direction at the same time. Ethan and Hannah loved each other deeply. No one can take that away. But sometimes loving someone also means letting them go, allowing them to find happiness, even if that happiness doesn't include you. And Ethan's strength wasn't in showing up to the wedding with a brave smile. It was in quietly stepping back, choosing peace over pride, choosing healing over reopening old wounds. That's a kind of maturity we don't talk about enough. Knowing when a door has truly closed, and having the courage not to keep knocking. If you've ever held on to a hope that quietly slipped through your fingers, if you've ever faced a goodbye you didn't want but knew you needed, then you understand the kind of quiet, aching bravery Ethan showed that day. Remember, some chapters aren't meant to be rewritten. They are meant to be honored, and then with gratitude and a heavy but open heart, left behind. After Ethan's story was shared, the comment section became a place of quiet understanding. People didn't just share sympathy. They shared their own memories, their own goodbyes. Because sometimes the deepest connections aren't forged through triumph, but through shared losses. Let's take a look at some of the most powerful comments, reflections of a kind of love that hurts, but also heals. Comment: still hoping. Closure isn't something they give you. It's something you have to find inside yourself. 18 4K likes. Exactly. Waiting for someone else to heal your wounds will only keep you standing in the past. Closure is a gift you give yourself. Comment 2, you faded letters. Not all love stories are meant to last forever. Some are just meant to teach us how deeply we're capable of loving. 16 9K likes. Beautifully said. Every love leaves its mark. And sometimes that mark is what shapes who we become. Comment 3, you quiet goodbye. Respecting someone's happiness, even when it hurts you, is the highest form of love. 17 6K likes. Absolutely. Real love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means letting go with grace. Comment 4, you heart lessons. Some invitations aren't meant to be accepted. They're meant to remind you that you survived the ending. 15 8K likes. That's so true. Ethan didn't just survive losing Hannah. He survived choosing peace over reopening old wounds. Comment 5, you walk away. Wiser. You know you've healed when you can smile at the memories without needing them to come back. Check teams. 16 2K likes. Exactly. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without bleeding. Reading these comments reminds us some chapters end quietly. Some goodbyes aren't explosive. They're just necessary. And real strength isn't measured by how tightly you can hold on, but by how bravely you can let go. If you're listening and carrying the weight of a love that didn't last, know this: you didn't fail. You grew. And somewhere in that quiet growth